Hi everyone, in this video we'll be going over A-Level Accounting 2022 October-November paper 2 question number 2. This is a structured paper 2 which consists of 4 questions. 2 of those will be of 30 marks and 2 of those will be of 15 marks, and then we are given a total time limit of 1 hour and 30 minutes. Since question number 2 is of 15 marks, ideally we should be spending about 15 minutes in order to complete this question, and in this video as well we will be attempting to solve this question under 15 minutes. So without any further delay, let's get started. Usman has extracted the following information from his books of account in order to update the sales ledger control account for the month of August 2022. Alright, we are given the balance brought down, check receipts from credit customers, customers dishonored checks, sales journal totals, and sales returns journal totals. Usman has produced a list of all customer account balances at 31st August 2022, totaling 30,477. Then he has discovered the following. Alright, first of all, let's have a look at our question. We need to prepare the updated sales ledger control account, and we also need to prepare an amended total of customer account balances. So let's have a look at the above information and figure out which of these information affect the control account and the customer account balances. The very first one is the total of the sales journal had been overcast by 600. So this is affecting the sales journal, and sales journal only affects our control account balances, right? So this is for the control account, right? And it had been overcast by 600. If the sales have been overstated, then we need to reduce this amount, right? So let's subtract 600 from our sales journals totals. We have the total of 29,760. Let's subtract 600. Then we'll get the correct total of 29,160. Then the second one is discounts allowed of 218 had been entered in customer's account, but no entries had been made in the control account. So this has already been entered in the customer's account, which means that this information will only affect the control account. Then the third one is a contra for 325, which had been correctly entered in both the customer's account and the supplier's account. Again, there has been no mention of the control account, which means that we still need to update this information in the control account, but since this has already been entered in the customer's account, we do not need to include this in our amended customer account balances. Then the fourth one is a customer's overpayment of 65, which had been repaid by check, but no entries had been made in the books of account. Since there has been no entries at all, this will affect both our control account as well as the customer account. Then the fifth one is a check received from Musa for 250, which had been posted to the account of Hussein. So the entry for this 250 has been made to the correct side, but under the wrong heading, right? Instead of posting it to the account of Musa, we posted it to the account of Hussein. And this does not really affect our control account as well as the customer account. So we can just completely ignore this information. Then we have an irrecoverable debt of 180, which had been correctly written off in the customer's account. So this does not affect the customer's account, but had not been entered in the control account, which means that we still need to adjust this information to our control account. And the seventh one is a credit balance of 315 on a customer's account had been incorrectly entered as a debit balance in the list of customer account balances. And we do not need to correct it in the control account because we are explicitly told that the error has been made in the customer account balances, which means that we only need to adjust it to the total for customer account balance. Alright, now let's get started with our updated sales ledger control account. First of all, let's write down all of the information given right here. So we already included our balance. The second one is check receipts from credit customers. So this will definitely reduce our balance in the sales ledger control account, which means that this should be posted to the credit side, right? And these are the check receipts, which will be recorded in our cash book. So we can write it under the heading of cash book on our credit side, right? So that will be cash book. And since these are the check receipts, that will be basically received in our bank. And the amount was 32,840. Okay. Then the second one is customers dishonored checks, and the customers dishonored check will obviously increase our balance in the sales ledger control account, right? And the increments are always to be recorded on the debit side, which means that this amount of 1,020 should be recorded on the debit side. Again, this relates to the dishonored checks, so which will be mentioned in our cash book, right? Let's write it down. So that's cash book. Again, since this involves check, that's going to be bank with the amount of 1020. Then the next one is sales journal totals. Sales journal totals will definitely increase the total balance, which should be recorded on the debit side, right? And the correct amount is 29,160. So let's write it down. That is the sales total, which we take from the sales book, right? And this has the correct amount of 29,160. Okay. Then the fifth one we have is sales returns journals total, which will definitely decrease our balance for the sales ledger control account, right? And this amount should be recorded on the credit side. So that's going to be sales returns. Again, this is recorded from the book. So in the bracket, we will be writing book. So that's sales return with the value of 980. Now we need to make our adjustments. The first one, we have already adjusted this overcast of 600, right? So we're done with this information. The second one, we have discounts allowed of 218, which had not been entered in the control account yet. And the discounts allowed will definitely reduce our balance in the sales ledger control account, which means that this amount should be recorded on the credit side. So let's write it down. That is discounts allowed, and that will be mentioned in our cash book. So that's cash book with the discounts allowed, and the amount was of 218. Then the third one is a contra of 325, which had not yet been mentioned in our sales ledger control account. And in the sales ledger control account, the contra will always be recorded on the credit side, right? And this contra is under the heading of purchase ledger control account, because this contra amount of 325 should also be recorded in the purchase ledger control account, right? So under that heading, we will be mentioning this amount of 325 on the credit side. Let's write it down. That's going to be the purchase ledger control account, and this is just the contra with the amount of 325. All right, then the next information is a customer's overpayment of 65, which had been repaid by check, but no entries had been made in the books of accounts. So this overpayment of 65, basically we need to pay it back to the customers, and whatever the customers pay to us is always recorded on the credit side, which means that the payment made by us should be recorded on the debit side. So this 65 should be on the debit side in our sales ledger control account. Again, this is a payment which will be recorded in our cash book and bank, right? So that's going to be cash book and bank with the amount of 65. All right. Then we do not need to look at information 5, and information 6, we have irrecoverable debt of 180, which had not yet been entered in the control account. And irrecoverable debt is something that will reduce our balance in the sales ledger control account, which means that this amount should be mentioned on the credit side. And this is an irrecoverable debt which is taken from the journal, right? So our heading that we will be recording it will be journal. And this is the irrecoverable debt with the amount of 180. All right, we are done with information 6, which means that we basically included all of the information that needed adjustment in our sales ledger control account, which means that we can now move towards figuring out our closing balance, which will be on the credit side. So that's going to be balance CD, which will act as our balancing figure. And in order to figure out the balancing figure, we first require the total. So let's figure out the total by adding these four amounts in our debit side. That's 34,210 plus 1,020 plus 29,160 plus 65, which results in the total of 64,455. And this will again be the total for credit side as well. Now, in order to figure out the balance CD, which acts as our balancing figure, we just need to subtract these amount from the total. In this case, that's going to be 64,455 minus 32,840 minus 980 minus 218 minus 325 minus 180, which results in the balance to be of 29,912. Now, the next step that we need to include would be to include this closing balance as the opening balance for the next accounting period, right? So that's going to be balance brought down, and the opening balance for this period will be the same as that of the closing balance of the last period. So that's going to be 29,912. This concludes the first part. Now we can move towards preparing the amended total of customer account balances. Okay, let's have a look. And remember that in customer account balances, the debit side balances are recorded as a positive balance and the credit side balances are recorded as a negative balance. And the credit side balances are basically all of the payments made by customers. All right, so these are the payments made by customers. Okay, now we need to include or adjust the information number 4. And in this information, we are told that a customer's overpayment of 65 had been repaid by check. Again, on the credit side or on the negative balance, we only include the payments made by customers. And this 65 is a payment made by us, which means that this will be recorded on the debit side, which just means that we need to record this amount of 65 as a positive amount in order to figure out the amended customer account balance. So let's do that. We can write it under the heading of customer overpayment. And the amount is 65. Okay, so we are done with information 4. And the next information that we need to adjust in our customer account balance is information 7, where a credit balance of 315, credit balance should be a negative balance in our customer account balances, right? Had been incorrectly entered as a debit balance. So what actually should have been negative 315 was included as a positive 315. And now we need to amend it. So if we were to record 315 as a negative balance once, the previous positive balance and the negative balance would just cancel each other out, and there would be no negative 315 to reflect the actual credit balance on that customer's account, right? So if we include a negative 315 twice, once it will get cancelled with the previously entered positive balance, right? And once it will reflect the correct credit balance. So the total adjustment to be made is going to be 315 plus 315, but in a negative balance. So that results in the negative balance of 630. This is the adjustment that we need to make. All right, let's write it down. This is the correction of credit balance. And that's 630, but in a negative. And this concludes everything that we need to adjust in our customer account balances. So we can now just figure out the total by adding these 3 amounts. And that will give the amended total of customer account balances, right? So that's amended total of customer account balances. And that is just going to be 30,477 plus 65 minus 630, which results in 29,912. And there is a way to check if what we did is correct or not. That is just to compare our amended total of customer account balances with our closing balance of the sales ledger control account, which is also 29,912. And since these two amounts are equal, we can conclude that our sales ledger control account as well as the total of customer account balances is correct. This concludes the second part. We can now move towards the third one. We now need to state one limitation of preparing a control account. So the very first limitation is that it does not identify all types of error, because as we can see above, here, we did not adjust this information 5, although it is an error, right? A check received from Musa had been posted to the account of Hussein. This is basically an error of commission, which was not identified by our sales ledger control account. So that is definitely a limitation. Let's write it down. Does not identify all types of error. This concludes the third part. We can now move towards the fourth one. We need to explain why a sales ledger control account would help in the prevention of fraud. So this is because the preparation of the sales ledger control account should be carried out by a different person or a different member of staff than the person who is preparing the sales ledger account, right? So that way the balances in the sales ledger account and the balance in the sales ledger control account can be compared, and if there is any sort of mistakes, then we can easily identify the fraud which is performed by that member of staff who is preparing the corresponding accounts. Let's write it down. Preparation of the sales ledger control account should be carried out by a different member of staff so that collusion between two people would be required for fraud to be present. Alright, this concludes the fourth part as well as this entire question number 2 of 2022 October-November paper 2-2. If you found this video useful, make sure you like the video and leave a comment below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you do not miss any of these videos in the future. Thank you.